Okay, let's dive right into this. Today we're looking at an explainer that tracks what is arguably one of the most recognizable hero's journeys in all of literature and history. We're unpacking the opening chapters of the book of Exodus. Now, whether you grew up hearing the story or you're coming to it completely with fresh eyes, seeing the actual structural breakdown of these events, it really highlights the incredible narrative arc at play here. We're going to trace a story that goes from sweeping national oppression, zooming all the way down to the survival of just one single child, and ultimately to a cosmic encounter out in the desert.
We have to start right here. This plunges us directly into the massive life or death stakes of this political landscape. I mean, this isn't just a story about one guy. It's a story born out of a brutal societal threat. This decree by the Pharaoh of Egypt literally sets our entire narrative in motion. It's absolute, state-sponsored destruction aimed at a specific group, creating an environment of just sheer terror. It makes the survival of our protagonist seem, honestly, completely impossible.
Section 1. A King Who Knew Not. To understand how we get to that terrifying decree, we have to look at the political landscape, which dramatically shifts years after the death of Joseph. There's this deeply resonant line from the source material. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Think about the weight of that for a second. Joseph was the guy who had previously saved Egypt from famine. He brought the Israelites into the land as favored guests. But, generations pass. The original 70 souls of Jacob's family, they've become fruitful. They increased abundantly, multiplied, waxed exceedingly mighty. And this incredible expansion sparked a very real existential fear in this new regime. The new pharaoh looks at this minority population and sees a massive security threat, worrying they might join Egypt's enemies if a war breaks out. It's a tragic political tactic we've seen throughout history, right? Scapegoating a minority out of national security fears to consolidate power.
So the state cracks down. Now, what's really fascinating about this systemic oppression is the sheer scale of it. They put taskmasters over the Israelites to afflict them with heavy burdens. They're literally forced to build treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. Their lives are made incredibly bitter with hard bondage in mortar, brick, and service in the field. But here's the wild paradox that's explicitly noted in the text. The more the Egyptians afflicted the Israelites, the more they multiplied and grew. The oppression just completely fails to curb their population, which of course only makes the Egyptian leadership even more paranoid.
Section 2. The Boy in the River. Because forced labor doesn't work, the state takes far more drastic measures. And the escalation here is chilling. First, Pharaoh tries a covert approach. He commands the Hebrew midwives, the text specifically names Shiphrah and Puah, to quietly kill any newborn sons as they're delivered. But these women exhibit this incredible heroic defiance. The text says they feared God and just flat out refused the king's command, saving the boys. When they're called out on it, they cleverly claim the Hebrew women give birth too quickly, before the midwives even get there. And because of this quiet rebellion, Pharaoh drops the secrecy entirely. He issues the public, terrifying decree we saw at the start. Every single newborn son must be cast into the river. Right in the middle of this state-mandated tragedy, a boy is born to a couple from the house of Levi. His mom sees he's a goodly child and somehow manages to hide him for 3 months. When she literally can't hide him any longer, she builds a small ark out of bulrushes, waterproofs it with slime and pitch, and places him in the reeds by the river's brink. His sister stands far off to keep watch. And guys, this is where the story takes a wildly ironic turn. Pharaoh's own daughter comes down to the river to wash, spots the ark, and has compassion on this crying infant, recognizing he's a Hebrew child. The boy's sister bravely steps out and says, "Hey, should I go fetch a Hebrew nurse for you?" The princess says yes, so the sister runs and gets the child's actual mother. The biological mom is quite literally paid wages by the royal family to nurse her own hidden child. You just can't make this stuff up. When the child grows up, he's brought back to Pharaoh's daughter and officially becomes her son. She names him Moses, meaning drawn out of the water. Now look at this intense dual identity. He is Hebrew by birth, secretly nursed and influenced by his biological mother during those crucial early years. Yet he's entirely Egyptian by upbringing, afforded the ultimate privilege of being raised by a princess. Just imagine the psychological toll there, growing up in the exact same palace that called for the mass destruction of your own people. This dichotomy is absolutely crucial. It sets Moses up for a life caught right in the crossfire of two fiercely colliding worlds. Section 3. Murder and Exile. As Moses reaches adulthood, that collision finally happens. We're shifting the tone to a much darker, more violent chapter.
Moses leaves the palace and goes out among his brethren. He doesn't just see the abstract idea of slavery, he looks directly on their burdens. And he spots an Egyptian actively beating a Hebrew. Moses makes a split-second fatal calculation. He looks this way, looks that way, sees no one is watching, and in an impulsive, violent turning point, he kills the Egyptian and buries him in the sand. In one instant, his comfortable life as a privileged prince is completely shattered. The very next day, Moses tries to break up a fight between two Hebrew men, asking the guy in the wrong why he's striking his fellow, and the man fires back with this absolutely devastating line. "Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killedst the Egyptian?" Moses is struck with sheer panic. He realizes his secret is out, he hasn't been accepted as some savior by his own people, and even worse, the news reaches Pharaoh, and Pharaoh immediately seeks to execute Moses for the crime.
So Moses has no choice. He has to run. He flees from the face of Pharaoh entirely, traveling way out to the land of Midian. Think about this massive transition. He goes from being royalty in the greatest empire on earth to sitting exhausted by a well in the desert. While he's there, he defends the 7 daughters of a Midianite priest named Jethro, also known as Ruel, from some aggressive shepherds. This act of justice earns him a place in their home. He marries one of the daughters, Zipporah, and they have a son. Moses names him Gershom, which essentially means, "I have been a stranger in a strange land." He has fully transitioned into a humble, isolated shepherd, miles and miles away from the cries of Egypt.
Section 4. The Burning Bush. Years, generations actually pass. The king of Egypt dies, but the bondage remains. The children of Israel are crying out to God, and the narrative moves from this quiet exile to a massive, cosmic encounter. Moses is leading Jethro's flock to the backside of the desert, arriving at Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, and it's here he witnesses an impossible supernatural phenomenon. The angel of the Lord appears in a flame of fire right out of the middle of a bush. Moses looks, and it defies physics. The bush is burning with fire, but it isn't burning up. It's not consumed. So he turns aside to investigate this great sight, and out of the fire, God calls his name twice, "Moses, Moses." This is the epic, inciting incident of Moses' true purpose. God commands him to take off his shoes because he's standing on holy ground. He identifies himself historically, not as some new, unknown deity, but as the God of his ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the commission he gives is direct and world-altering. God says he's seen the affliction of his people, heard their cry, and knows their sorrows. He intends to deliver them to a good land flowing with milk and honey. And then comes the real kicker. He tells Moses, "I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people." Moses immediately pushes back. I mean, wouldn't you? He asks, "If I go to the Israelites and say the God of your fathers sent me, they're going to ask for your name. What do I tell them?" And God replies with this phrase of just profound historical and literary gravitas. "I am that I am." He tells Moses to say, "I am hath sent me unto you." It's a declaration of absolute, self-existent reality. It bridges the cosmic scale right back down to human understanding, giving Moses the ultimate authority to take back to his suffering people.
Section 5. The Call to Return.
Having divine authority and actually feeling capable of executing it are two very, very different things. Moses objects, again, saying they're not going to believe me. So God provides these tangible, miraculous proofs. He asks Moses what's in his hand. It's just a regular shepherd's rod. God tells him to throw it down, and it becomes a living serpent, so frightening that Moses actually runs away from it. Then God tells him to grab it by the tail, and it turns right back into a rod. Next, God has Moses put his hand into his bosom. It comes out leprous, white as snow. He does it again, and it's completely healed. Finally, God says if they still don't believe, Moses is to take water from the river and pour it on dry land, where it will literally turn to blood. I mean, these are massive signs of power. So the crucial point is, even after seeing a burning bush, hearing the literal voice of God, and holding a miracle-working staff, Moses still resists. He offers this deeply vulnerable confession. "Oh my Lord, I am not eloquent, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue." Moses is paralyzed by profound insecurity. He begs God to send someone else. It's such a fascinating look at how a hero views their own perceived weaknesses, even when they're backed by a grand cosmic display of power. It's actually deeply relatable, right? It's that overwhelming imposter syndrome popping up exactly when you're called to step up and do something extraordinary.
The text notes that the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses for this resistance. But God does provide a practical solution.
To contrast Moses' perceived weakness, he appoints Aaron the Levite, Moses' brother. God specifically notes that Aaron can speak well, so they're going to be this dynamic duo. Moses will have the divine direction and the rod of power, and Aaron will act as the designated spokesman, the mouthpiece to the people, and eventually to Pharaoh.
With the excuses finally exhausted on the plan set, we reach the literal turning point of the explainer. Moses goes back to his father-in-law Jethro, asks for permission to leave, and packs up his entire life. He takes his wife, his sons, and crucially, the rod of God in his hand. He begins the fateful journey back into the very heart of the empire that once wanted him dead. He's no longer just a shepherd hiding in the desert, he is returning as a deliverer.
Which leaves us staring over a massive, dramatic precipice. Moses is heading back to Egypt, but he's walking into the court of a pharaoh whose heart, as the text foreshadows, will be hardened. So I want to leave you to think on this. How will a reluctant, stuttering shepherd, even armed with a miraculous rod and his brother's voice, possibly convince the most powerful, unyielding ruler on earth to just let his entire enslaved workforce walk free? The stage is perfectly set for an unbelievable confrontation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep that question in mind as you explore the rest of the text.